how's it going? My name's Steve and today I'm in Paris.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got myself into this situation. And that just about gets you up to date.
I thought I'd give you a quick rundown of some of the public transport that I'm using while I'm here. So let's go and have a look. Allons-y.
So let's start by having a look at how Paris's transport system fits together. Paris is a very large city with a huge population and a lot of tourism, so it needs a very extensive transit network to serve its residents and its visitors. The transit network comprises of several different modes, and this map of the inner city shows 3 of the main ones. So Paris has a very famous and a very extensive metro system, and if you live and work there, or if you visit the city, you'll probably be using this extremely frequently. Next there's Paris's suburban commuter rail, which is called the RER Regional, or Regional Express Network, and this is usually abbreviated as RER. So these lines act pretty similarly to the metro in the city centre, going under the city in tunnels and having underground stations. But compared to the metro, they run much larger train sets, there are larger gaps between the stations, and the lines extend much further out into the suburban areas around the city. And finally on this map we have the tramways, which mostly serve the periphery of the city. And all of these tramways have been built pretty recently, since the 1990s. Paris actually used to have a very large tramway network in the 1800s, but most of these were ripped out in the 1930s. On this next map we can see Paris's very large and well-connected bus network. So using the buses isn't quite as straightforward as the metro, because you need a little bit more thought about where the bus lines are going. But they can be quite a good way of seeing the city, because you get to see the sights out the windows instead of just seeing the inside of an underground tunnel. They can also be a bit better for people with mobility impairments, because a lot of the metro stations don't have lifts. And zooming out, we have Paris's other commuter rail system, which is called the Transilien. Now unfortunately the only map I could get of this system has it intermingled with the RER and the metro. Now these lines operate in a pretty similar way to the RER, and like the RER lines, they have letters as opposed to the numbers of the Paris metro. But one big difference is that instead of crossing the city centre like the RER, these lines operate from Paris out into the regions from terminus stations around the city. And finally, apparently the newest mode is going to be a commuter cable car, which is going to be built in Paris's southeastern suburbs. So this is supposed to open in 2025, and if it goes well, apparently there's 12 other lines that they're considering. So that sounds fun. So let's have a deeper dive into the Paris Metro. The Paris Metro is made up of 16 lines, which are numbered 1 to 14. If you're wondering where those other 2 went, well there's actually 2 line 3s and 2 line 7s. What happened is that a section of each of these lines was chopped off and is now operated completely separately. So the larger section of the line just uses the number, whereas the smaller one will use the line number followed by the suffix bis. So for example, there's a line 3 and a line 3 bis. So the metro does extend into the suburbs to some extent, but as you can see, it's mostly concentrated around the city centre, which I have highlighted here. And this is a bit of a zoomed in look at the map, and you can see how the lines connect. Now if we take a bit of a zoomed out look at the region, we can see that the exact opposite is true of the tramways. In fact, the innermost tram lines, the orange T3A and the green T3B, basically follow the Boulevard Périphérique, which forms the border of the inner city. And the rest of the network is in the outer regions. During my time in France, the mode of transport that I definitely used the most was their amazing metro system. Throughout the network, you can either buy paper tickets from vending machines or use a Navigo card like the one that I'm using here. It's not possible to pay directly with contactless cards. This is what a pretty standard metro station looks like, and you hear that little jingle a lot because they use it before basically every announcement. One thing that's quite interesting about the Paris Metro, which you should be able to see here, is that several of the lines use these rubber-tied train sets. You can see that there are also horizontal wheels onto the steel guideways, which means that the driver doesn't actually have to steer the train. Now the station that I'm in is in an underground section of the metro, but there are also a lot of sections that are above ground or on viaducts. Some of the lines had these fun manual door openers, but on other lines there are trains with automatic doors, and there are even some places with platform screen doors. Some lines have a mix of stations with and without platform screen doors, and some lines have automatic train control, so they always have platform screen doors at the stations. These automatic ones are especially fun because you can go up to the front and get a driver's eye view.
Champs-Élysées, Clémenceau.
Now, there are a whole lot of different designs of stations on the Paris Metro, but a lot of them are based on this sort of white tile design with creative use of coloured tiles, which are used to mark out patterns and station names, and some of them have these really intricate detailing. And there are some stations that have completely different designs, such as this one at RER Métier, which means arts and crafts. The whole station's been decorated in this sort of steampunk, Jules Verne sort of vibe, and it looks really cool. You can see some pretty serious effort's been put into the whole theme, with the custom light fixtures, the big wheel and gear sculptures on the roof, the signage, the portholes on the walls. Even these chairs and the bins are completely custom. And now for a completely different kind of vibe, we come to Louvre Rivoli. So this station just oozes classiness, and I think that reflects the famous museum which this station serves. There's even sculptures and artifacts on display, such as this sculpture of an Egyptian goddess. And these more classical Greek and Italian looking sculptures. So really not the kind of thing you normally expect to see in a busy train station. It's very cool. So this station is on the automated Line 1, and if you want that driver's eye view, you can board at the front here, along this colonnade. Most of the lines in the Paris Metro have a side platform arrangement, which is when you have the lines in the middle and a platform on either side. But every now and then you see some different arrangements, such as this one at Châtelet. So this is one of the rare island platforms that you see on the network. Now this station's at the end of one of the lines, so I imagine that has something to do with why the platforms are arranged in this way. And if you look down, you get a glimpse of where the trains change direction between finishing one service and starting the next. Now, in terms of wayfinding and getting your way around stations, I did find that they were typically pretty well signed and they tended to be pretty good, although there were some times when I did get lost trying to find the right exit. And there tend to be these helpful maps on the way to the platforms. Now, one quite interesting thing is that there does seem to be some incredibly long interchanges between some of the lines. This one was at Montparnasse-Bienvenue, and they look like basically the same station on the map, but it turns out that the interchange between them is several hundred metres long, which also involves a couple of hundred metres of travellators. Most of the stations have these really useful information boards showing the line you're on, the direction you're going, and dot matrix indicators for how long it's going to take for the next two trains and what the current time is. And on Line 4, which was the most recently converted to automatic train operation, they're completely digital over the platform edge doors. And next we come to Paris's regional network, or the RER, and I only used this a couple of times in my time in France. I didn't get that much of a chance to get out into the outskirts of the city, but the RER was the most convenient way to get to the Luxembourg Gardens, which is where I was going to on this trip that I filmed here. You can see that the trains used on this network are a lot larger than the ones used in the Paris Metro, and they have a lot more seating than the metro-style trains. And just like the Paris Metro, the RER seemed to be very busy every time I took it, so it seems to be a very popular system. The RER has 5 lines, which are designated A, B, C, D, and E. This trip that I took here was on Line B, which runs sort of north-south through the city. Through the centre of Paris, all of the RER lines run underground, and all the stations are underground as well. So as I arrive here at Luxembourg Station, we'll get a bit of a look at the rolling stock that I'm on, as well as a pretty typical RER station. Line B uses some of the oldest trains on the network, the MI-79 and MI-84 rolling stock, which were all constructed between 1980 and 1990. These trains have all been refurbished more recently though, with the MI-79s being overhauled between 2010 and 2015, and the MI-84s being refurbished from 2018 onwards. You can see that the train here is powered by overhead line, and interestingly these trains are dual voltage, using both 1500 volts DC and 25 kilovolts AC in different parts of the network. As I leave the station, you can see that I'm tapping out using my Navigo card, so the fares are all integrated with other modes like the metro in the system. From the mezzanine level of the station, there was a window that provided a pretty good view down onto the platform, so I stopped to take a bit more footage of this train leaving. In general, the lines of the RER are pretty straightforward. They do have some branches and things, but that's pretty typical of these kind of lines. The most obvious exception to this though is Line C, which as well as having a bunch of branches, also has a bunch of loops as well. I was told by the locals who I was working with to avoid this line when I was going to Versailles one weekend. Apparently even they find it confusing, and sometimes get on a train and end up going to the wrong destination. So this is the trip that I took to Versailles, and I ended up using the Transilien Line N. Luckily I was staying within walking distance to the big station in Montparnasse, and this station also has TGV services going from it as well. So for this trip I decided to buy a paper ticket because I wasn't actually sure whether it would work with the pass that I had on my Navigo card. It was fairly straightforward once I found the right machine, which is this one. Before this, I tried to buy a ticket on one of the ticket machines for the mainline railways. Even though that machine looked the same and is operated by the same operator, SCNF, when I put in my destination, it wouldn't be able to find a valid route. So the automated gates can take a paper ticket or the Navigo card, just like on the RER and the metro. Unlike the RER, the Transilien lines don't go through the Paris city centre, so the lines start and end at terminal stations, like Montparnasse where I am now. This line, like a lot of the Transilien, use really nice, clean, modern trains, and they're double-decker as well. It was very nice to sit up on the upper deck and have a nice view out of the French suburbs. Here's a bit of a look at the train departing as I got ready to make my way to the palace in Versailles. These Class 57,000 Regio 2N trains were designed by Bombardier, but that's since been bought out by Alstom. And they come in lengths of 6, 7, 8 or 10 cars per train set. So this is the return journey, and the station had some pretty cool 1920s architecture, which you can see here. I'd bought a return ticket, so this is the same paper ticket that I bought at Montparnasse. This train that you can see departing on the other platform is the same Regio 2N rolling stock that's used on the Transilien, but it's a regional service in a special Val de Loire livery. So my Line N Transilien train arrived pretty soon, and as we enter here you can get a bit of a view of the interior of the train. As you can see, they are very spacious, clean and modern. This footage was taken on a Sunday afternoon, so it was definitely the quietest that I'd seen any train that I'd been on in my time in France. Just like on the journey here, I made my way up to the top deck so I'd get the best view that I could out of the window. And as we roll back into Montparnasse station, you can see some of the TGV trains which are used for intercity services. And so I made my way out of the train. You can see that the station here kind of looks like an underground station, even though it's on ground level. So there are large office buildings built around the station, but above the platforms there's actually a large garden and green space which is publicly accessible. And as I make my way out, you can see that even though the suburban lines were very quiet, the station was very, very busy. So it was really good to see lots of tourists and locals out on the network, and I think it just goes to show how well connected and convenient train travel is in France. So I don't have too much to show you about the bus network because I didn't use it a lot. The buses generally looked quite modern and had these useful LED dot matrix displays on them. If I make another journey to France later in the year, I might make another video on those, as well as the tramways, which I didn't really get to ride. I also want to have a go on these cool little electric buses. I saw this one around Montmartre. And of course the other thing I'd like to cover eventually is the amazing cycling network which Paris has been building up. So I hope to make it back soon. Well, I hope you enjoyed this overview of Paris's transit network. If you like these kind of videos, please subscribe, and if you hit the like button or leave a comment, that helps YouTube to know to suggest the video to other people who might also be interested. If you'd like to support the channel, you can donate on my Ko-fi page. But thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.